Today we're covering Riptide, and for Riptide today, we're going to be doing like an aggro-focused Cheerios build. So this is going to be a deck that isn't ever trying to pitch intentionally. It is a deck that entirely plays zero-cost cards for the most part, and your main game plan is pretty similar to most other aggro decks, but you will have some of the Ranger on hits, and you do have access to the traps in the sideboard. I think you could build this deck to be more fatigue focused, playing all the traps in the main board, but there's not a lot of health. And with not a lot of health, good aggro cards will usually triumph, especially when you have access to a lot of very powerful cards from the Ranger assortment. That's going to be cards like the Lace cards, especially Lace with Blood Rot. We're playing Red Spine Manta. It's kind of interesting because there actually are some cards that will allow us to chain multiple things together. For people who are unaware with Riptide's hero text, whenever we play a card from hand, we get a free reload. The other half of the text is also relevant if we want to play more traps, but the main focus of this deck for today is going to be mainly honing in on that first part, which is that we're just going to be reloading a bunch, and so we need a lot of cards with Go Again. We need to play cards from hand. Our Red Spine Mana will let us load an arrow face up, which is going to be relevant for some cards like Dry Powder Shot. So what we can do is we can play some in like a pump. We can play a Bolden Shot that will get to reload for free off of Riptide's trigger. This will just have Go Again. And then even if our opponent blocks it out, we can just follow it up by loading again with the Red Spine Manta, dropping another arrow into our arsenal, and then firing that off. So the deck is trying to delicately balance between this ratio of having the Nimbleism package with the Jack Be Quick and Nimbles, having the Nimbleisms and the Nimby, while also having these pumps that can only target arrows. So we will see in the gameplay today if this actually is an okay ratio, or if the ratio needs to get skewed a little bit more. To have them not accidentally get in each other's way. And then we also have cards that will synergize with our bow, something like Fire in the Hole, right? Where we can load an arrow with Red Spine Manta that has Go Again. We can then play Fire in the Hole, untap our bow, fire our Go Again arrow, load another arrow, play it as well. So the damage output on this deck is going to be absolutely crazy when it sequences properly. In our inventory, we do have traps, so if you would like to side them in, this will be helpful for some matchups that play mainly in the reaction step with cards like a Blood Rot Trap. And I could see this doing very well, slowing down some other decks, right? Like with Tar Pit Trap, you can play this into an aggro mirror and shut off their on hit. If you're playing against a deck that wants to go wide with its weapons, like Ninja, you can play Frailty Trap, and that'll be very powerful. Into decks that buff a lot of things, think about Warrior. We covered Dory on the channel. Blood Rot Trap, Frailty Trap, and Inertia Trap, and Boulder Trap are all very good. So there's plenty of reason to play the traps. I'll include them for the sideboard. We'll see if we side them in today. But overall, the deck is pretty streamlined. It's just blowing up the opponent as early as turn 2, right? And we're going to be using all of our equipment as early as we can, as fast as we can, and we're just going to deal a ton of damage. So we'll jump into some gameplay. So here we're playing against Enigma. I ended up opting out of actually playing any of the traps just because I wanted to kind of highlight the fully aggressive package, and this is just the matchup I was given. I actually think that there's a pretty good argument to actually playing traps in this matchup, mainly because of the fact that her ward cards usually trigger most of the traps. Think about like Boulder, Frailty, Carpet, any of this stuff. And so you're actually able to just pop the ward. But it looks like that she's actually potentially playing a more focused Phantasm build. We're just going to say no blocks. There's basically no reason to ever block in this deck unless if your opponent is presenting lethal or is presenting some kind of disruption and your hand is non-functional. And it looks like that we're probably just going to be sending a Searing Shot with Go Again, probably using the quick clicks. So we'll go ahead and we'll use our Nimbleism. It's a little bit awkward because we would obviously prefer to use it with Nimby. So our Nimby is kind of a liability at this point. So we will go ahead and use the clicks here. A little bit interesting. I think we'll probably end up holding back the Lace for the Dry Powder Shot. It's going to push a pretty good on hit here. Although the only problem though is that this doesn't end up coming in on a break point, which is definitely pretty awkward. This one will end up coming in for 10 though, which I think is pretty good. Looks like our opponent isn't interested in blocking, so we'll at least make it a little bit difficult for them because this next attack will definitely be coming in for a lot. We'll go ahead and use Bracers here. We'll use Lace, and then we'll go ahead and load with the Manta. We're not gonna choose to load with Riptide here because we need this to come in face up. So this is where we want to use something like Manta. This will come in for 10. It's not lethal, so that is relevant. We could end up falling too far behind here, but my hope here is that we at least demand some cards from our opponent. Right, looks like it's going to be a defensive Waning Vengeance. So they end up taking no damage, and they're going to get to swing a Spectral at us, which is definitely not ideal. But our hope is that our next turn is pretty aggressive. Oh, I missed that they didn't pitch a blue, so they actually don't end up with the Spectral. Our hand, we can use the Honing Hood to be able to use the Bolden Shot into the Drill Shot. It may not be a bad use case of it. I don't know when else we're going to get the opportunity like this. The only other thing we could do here, though, is we could just play all of these and just play the Drill Shot. This will come in for 13, and then on a future turn, we can just play the Drill Shot with whatever buffs we draw next turn. So I think either one could work here. We also do need to think about things like breakpoints. Our opponent is going to definitely block the Drill Shot because they just have Beckoners, and Beckoners don't do anything really because we don't have a weapon. So we need to think about if we're putting this at 13, it does actually come in at a breakpoint because if they block for only 12 that they have available to them with the remaining equipment, it will require an extra card from them. So I think it may be okay here just to send this for 13. Presents lethal at the very least. And it presents an on hit. So it may be all right to do this here. I'm kind of worried though. They are playing Phantasm cards, so they very easily could present 11 to us. Think about something like any go again attack into Enigma Chimera could very quickly start to spell the end of our game. So that's the only thing I would maybe consider in terms of actually keeping the Bolden Shot and using the Honing Hood and playing out this whole hand. Is maybe I'm worried that I may just be dead on the crackback. I don't really know if that's the case, so I'm willing to take this risk that I at least get maybe one more turn before my life total starts to become a lot more precarious. Looks like everything's connecting here, which is pretty interesting. So we'll go ahead and just put a counter on one of the random equipments, doesn't matter which. Now they have 2 less blocking equipment. So now I kind of do wish that I had sent the Bolden Shot. That's a hindsight thing here. It's very possible they could have blocked out with a lot of their hand. Our hand is pure gas. So if they don't present lethal, I'm not blocking. Our turn is just ideally, if they don't have lethal after this, it's just going to be playing a pump, playing a Bolden Shot, and then loading the Dry Powder Shot for game. 5 is not lethal. I'm not blocking this. I'm just hoping that they don't have any 0 cost from here. If they don't, think we probably just rip their entire hand for the rest of the game. This hand is going to be insane. I mean, we're looking at 13. We're looking at 18 damage here. So they are going to put us to 1 potentially. Oh, okay, no, they didn't play a blue that turn. That's very interesting. So we kind of get away with it. If they were going to use Enigma, they send it for 2. We just block the old knocker. It's partially why it's here. It's just a block 1 equipment mainly. So we get to keep everything. So we are absolutely happy about this for sure. They get a block for 7. It's good for them. Then with a gold token, it's not really a huge deal. But I think that we may just have lethal here. So we'll go ahead and load with the Red Spine Manta. Once again, it has to be with the bow. It can't be with the Riptide trigger because we need this to come in face up. And then we'll go ahead and we'll push this for 11. I don't know if they have a way to live at this point. At least if 1 damage connects, they also die to the Blood Rot on hit, so it probably doesn't make a huge difference either way. We just need 1 damage to go through. So we're gonna go ahead, just give this deck another spin, and I think what we're just gonna do here is probably just arsenal the arrows and pass. And it looks like our turn is probably just gonna be dumping 3 pumps and playing Searing Shot. Pretty straightforward game plan, putting the Pathing Helix in arsenal. It would be nice to run poppers in this deck. If Enigma ends up being more popular, we totally can. I mean, we do have access to things like Death Touch. A turn, depending on if there's a 2 cost at the very end. In the first game, we did see some 2 cost Phantasm Reds. So if that's the Chain Ender here, I think we're definitely in trouble. So I'm hoping that we get let off the hook a little bit. Okay, looks like we do. So the turn was only 5 damage. So I think we got a little bit lucky. We'll go ahead and play all of these cards, just all of our pumps, arsenal our Pathing Helix, and probably hope to draw a Nimbalism. That way we can play our Pathing Helix with Go again and just threaten to deal a ton of damage on the follow-up turn. So we get a block for 10 here. We both whiff on the test of strength. It looks like it probably will end up getting fully covered here. It's not really too big of a deal, but it does mean that she does get to keep her spectral. So that is the only problem here, is she will get an extra 2 damage out of this. We draw Nimblism, which means we can push a lot of damage in this turn if we want to. The only thing to consider, though, is it does mean that our Nimbies are not that useful. So once again, I am kind of tempted to just bank on these a little bit more, but I think she's going to get too much passive value out of the Spectral. And we also have to think about the fact that she's going to draw Test of Strength in this hand as well. We are down a lot of life, so we may just need to pull the trigger here. We'll go ahead, we'll use the boots for our go again. And then I think our hope here is that we actually get her to commit just enough to try to keep the Spectral Shield, that the follow-up with the Dry Powder Shot is enough just to do the card in. Mainly just because this is something we would prefer to have a lot of on-hits for, right? We would prefer that we're pushing more than just raw damage, but this turn has only been a raw damage. When you think about if we want to keep any pumps in our arsenal, I don't really think we need to. The deck is more concerned about not finding an arrow, to be honest. But something like Take Aim, I think could be perfectly fine in the arsenal. We just need to think about what her hand is. So we know that her hand is 1 test of strength, so she's getting a clean block, probably for 7 here. And I think with that in mind, it's a tough call. It's a tough call. I think we need to cycle a bit of an arsenal here, because if she plays something like Red Spectral Manifestation, right, we need to guarantee that we have enough damage to clear it off the table. If we were pushing an on-hit this turn or presenting lethal, I think we probably could definitely make a pretty easy argument to play the Take Aim, but I think that we're kind of still in this mid-game here, so probably it's going to arsenal this card and try to convert it into a really explosive 5-card hand. We need to make sure we always have ways to push over ward. We pushed over ward this turn, but there's no ward right now on the table, so I don't really think we need to commit all of our offensive resources right now. We're not low enough either that I think we'll definitely get to play this card, so I'm not super concerned about needing to block out the rest of the hand. Looks like her hand was going to be partially defensive anyway. She ends up with a gold. That's definitely unfortunate for us, but so unfortunately we do have some dead cards here. So I think we're going to block with a Pathing Helix. Our turn is just going to be Swift Shot into Nimby, getting a red Nimblism. It's good, and it probably clears the Spectral Shield. I am kind of worried though, because we are definitely low on life now, and it's pretty easy that we could end up losing this game. We descend this for 10, so we're sending 13. It is lethal. She has armor, so it's not really true lethal. We're not guaranteeing to take cards out of her hand, but I think we are pretty safe to clear the Spectral, which I think is very good for us. We definitely need to do that. We'll also get to cycle a very powerful buff into our arsenal, so Nimby, despite us not having the power turn with the equipment on this go around, it'll still function pretty well, right? It's just a 0 for 3 that's able to draw a card to your arsenal. So the hand we draw here, I think it'll at least probably be serviceable. We'll get to block out some of their turn. It's going to involve Red Spectral. That's really bad for us. We'll at least block this for 1, see what the follow-up here is. Red Spears, that's bad. We're gonna have to block. We're gonna have to block for sure. Our hope is that the turn ends here. I don't think it will. We definitely need to get this off the table. We need to keep an arrow here, so we're just going to go down to 2. Pretty terrifying. Our opponent can basically block out with their whole hand and just send the Spectral again for 4. I feel like the game is probably looking pretty terrible for us. We'll see if there's any way we can claw ourselves back in, but it's not looking promising in the slightest. Our opponent could even just give 2 cards plus the 2 remaining armor, play a 2-card hand that swings a Spectral as well. So if I had to guess, we probably lost this game. Blocking the blue Enigma Chimera and Red Spears. Oh, that's so terrible. That's terrible for us. That does not spell anything positive for what my opponent's hand is. My hope is that they just have a non-blocked Chi in hand and they were forced to give up one of their best cards. So we'll see what ends up happening. Not feeling very optimistic though. We are forced, unfortunately, to block this. We'll block it for 3. We'll have to go to 1. And if my opponent sends anything that demands 1 and 2 cards, yep, that'll do it. So we'll go ahead and block for 5 like this. Red Enigma Chimera is pretty crazy. We have to think about our arrow ratio if we want 1 more health, or if we want the chance to accidentally brick. I think I'm leaning more towards just taking the damage. I mean, my opponent's already going off of Arsenal. We're going to leak damage anyway. I don't know what the difference will be with the extra 1 health. I just really don't want the potential to brick going second. There's a liability that we could end up drawing too many arrows in this next hand, in which case we end up wanting the pump in the yard. But like, for instance, with this, I'm really glad I ended up keeping the hand that I did. So we're going to go ahead and we're actually just going to end up arsenaling one of the nimbleisms. We need to keep an arsenal because I think we have a lot of really powerful plays we can still do. So we'll go ahead and then we'll send our Bolden Shot. We could consider keeping the Falcon Wing in arsenal, just having access to an arrow line around I think is really good. I think either one is a pretty easy argument to make. I'm going to lean more towards a little bit of variance though. We did run the risk already of potentially not drawing an arrow on this hand, but we're going to go ahead and do it again. Mainly just because I haven't seen NIMBY yet, so I just want to make sure I have a Nimbleism available for when I do that. Go and send the Falcon Wing. What's kind of cool about this though is it disguises what our last card is. If my opponent thinks that I'm going to use Red Spine Manta and play like Drill Shot, for instance, at the end of the chain, maybe they save a card that they can't use on their turn, but we're just going to Arsenal and pass. My assumption is that it doesn't actually do anything, but there is a small likelihood that it could. We get a Jack B quick line. It's pretty solid. The hand plays itself pretty much. We have luckily an arrow, so if my opponent can't present at least 14 against us, we're just going to say no blocks on this turn. With an opener like this, I think we're pretty safe. It's probably just going to be 7 damage. We're perfectly fine going down to 6. So our turn is just going to be playing our Nimbleism, dumping everything on our bolts, and then playing our Jack B quick potentially at the very end. We have the option to use the bracers as well if we need the damage. Luckily, this comes in for 1 with the frailty, so the frailty on hit is relevant here, which is good. Currently, this is coming in for 12. We need to think about if we want to put it up to 14 and maybe really try to push these 2 on hits with the lace. I think that's probably an okay thing to do here. I mean, on hit, an extra 4, I think is pretty solid for us. Our opponent's basically locked into blocking with their entire hand here. And we're going to unfortunately have to play the Jack B quick. We need to clear the Spectral off the table, or else my opponent's going to get too much accrued value out of it. So as much as I would like to hold this in Arsenal, it has to go. Our opponent's at 5. We have full tempo. NIMBY in Arsenal is a little scary. It can be a liability. We've already seen 2 Nimbleisms, so our likelihood of seeing the other copies is a little bit lower. If we don't end up drawing a Nimbleism, this will be a pretty big liability. I'm hoping that we end up finding one. It's a little bit of a gamble. We can also decide to pivot a little bit based on what my opponent does here. If my opponent decides to fully block out, we could consider not arsenaling the NIMBY. It's a little scary either way. My opponent's not going to arsenal, so now this Nimbleism. This NIMBY can be a huge liability here. I really need to think pretty carefully about what I want to do. I think I'm going to lean towards not arsenaling it here. Just we have enough life total, and I can't run the risk of accidentally drawing a 5-card hand that only does 3 damage. So we see here, we're pretty rewarded for that decision. Maybe the next card could have been Nimbleism, but if it's not, we get locked on this thing being an arsenal without access to giving a go again. Our whole turn basically just crumbles. So we'll go ahead, we'll play this for 4, and then we'll probably play the Pathing Helix for 7. Now at this point, I might need to consider sending the NIMBY at the end. I think it's probably more likely that we're just going to go ahead and send the 7, and then we probably have to risk again arsenaling the NIMBY. Slowly becoming a liability here without the arms, but we see Nimbleism on top actually, so our opponent helps us make our decision actually. So we'll go ahead and we'll play our Lace, get our Riptide reload, And then we'll go ahead and send 7 here. Pretty amusing hindsight, knowing that the Nimblism was on top. We could have put the Nimby into Arsenal and probably just ended the game on this turn. But, you know, it's I think it was the safer line to take. I didn't really feel like running the risk. If my opponent kept cards, like let's say a 2-card hand, I could see us putting the Nimby in Arsenal because there's a good chance they're going to send something like Red Enigma Chimera, and that way we can block with 3 cards, play a Nimby, just filter Arsenal and just pass, right? If we don't draw the Nimblism. Waxing Spectre defensively isn't going to really do anything. I think my opponent is kind of locked out of the game at this point. We'll go ahead and Arsenal our Nimby. This hand is pretty much gas. I mean, the only thing we're kind of missing here is that we would probably prefer if the Falcon Wing was something like Dry Powder Shot. That would probably deterministically lock this game up, but we'll go ahead and we'll get to use our boots here. So we're going to send 5 into 4 into 6. But the other thing too, I forgot, is we're going to get another red Nimblism off the Nimby. So if we math it out that it will be lethal, we can just go ahead and play the Nimblism on this turn as well. All right, my opponent scoops it up. Yeah, so we can math it out pretty deterministically. So we send 4. My opponent could block like this, but if we send 8, they're dead on the spot. So hopefully that kind of gives a good, robust understanding of how we could play the deck like this. All right, so we're paired into Dory here, which is kind of helpful because I'll get to show off some of the trap package. We're just going to side out basically our Nimblism package, sacrificing some of the aggro output for a little bit more blocking control. So we'll go ahead and run the deck as is. The only problem though is that we actually end up losing basically our equipment suite here. So I think I might consider still keeping a couple of Nimblisms in, but we're going to go ahead and run the risk of our equipment's basically being duds here for the sake of at least showing off some of the traps. The nice thing too is that when we play the Boulder Trap from hand, we'll actually get the reload trigger. If we don't end up doing that, we can still use the Honing Hood, but this is kind of nice to basically flex ourselves into a 5-card hand going second. And the nice thing with Dory too is basically all of our stuff will turn on cards like Boulder Trap, right? So we're just going to go ahead and we can think about blocking for 6 here. I think it's probably like a safe line. I'm trying to think about anything that she might use to push it over. But at the very least, we can just block this for 6 and then use the Boulder Trap still, because this will still trigger here. And we can probably get her to try to push something over. She will get a agility token here, but we'll take the trade-off of her not having an arsenal going first. It's pretty good for us. We'll actually get an arsenal going second, which I think is going to be pretty powerful. And we'll get to start by putting a -1 counter on something of hers. Okay, so going second, we end up getting basically a perfect hand, so we're not really punished for having a higher trap density, because we're going to be able to play 3 pumps and then play our Pathing Helix. Now the nice thing here is we could either use the Riptide trigger or the Red Spine Manta. If for instance we had a Go Again arrow instead of this Bloodrot trap, a pretty cool thing we could do would actually be, you know, putting something face down with Go Again, and then playing our card, and then using the Red Spine Manta at the very end to play another arrow, potentially without Go Again. I think if the Dory tries to race here, we're going to end up giving her 2 Blood Rots, which I think is going to be pretty good for us. So it looks like it's going to be a partial block. So we will push the on hit. The only scary thing is that if we, for instance, got Dory to block out the whole hand, putting the Blood Rot trap in Arsenal would be a liability. Keeping Honing Hood up can be helpful for this, right? Because we're able to at least flex it out of the arsenal if we need to, but that is something to keep in mind. For instance, if you use Honing Hood aggressively going second and you break it immediately, that if your opponent is blocking out your entire hand, you might need to be a little bit careful if you want to actually arsenal a trap or not, because you're probably getting tempo and it's gonna be kind of scary to send something afterwards. This hand will pretty much get to showcase exactly how you can flex between all the different reload triggers. So looking at this, we're probably just going to play a call on the big guns, loading, for instance, like Falcon Wing, using Red Spine Manta on the Swift Shot to put it in face up, and then maybe getting to end the turn with a Drill Shot. Don't see React. Kind of wondering if we need to potentially bait it out by putting a card in front of it. I really do need this trap to trigger. Let's putting 3 on this. This is a little odd. I need this out of Arsenal. We can get it out with the Honing Hood. It just doesn't seem as good. If we do this, our turn is still going to be calling the big guns. We'll just opt out of the reload, and then we'll just reload with the Manta activation for the Swift Shot. Kind of trying to figure out if there's another way we can actually sequence this to still get the drill shot at the end. I don't think there really is with the way that this hand works. Although if we clear it out, we can go Red Spine Manta, play this with Go again, use the call on the big guns, reload the drill shot. Okay, so we found the line. I'm really hoping that there is a +3 react here, because we really... Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead, we'll let this resolve first, that way the Blood Rot Trap is now online. So we'll get to deal 1 to the Dory from our Riptide, and then Blood Rot Trap is going to trigger, giving a second Blood Rot. So Dory is going to go down to 9 on this turn before we even play our hand out at her. Okay, so for our turn, we're just going to load Manta, we'll load our Swift Shot, this will have Go again, and then we can do call on the big guns, get our Riptide reload trigger, and then play our drill shot for 7. You can think about potentially setting up some 5-card hands, and depending on if she starts blocking out a lot more, we'll probably have to pivot a little bit into blocking out. We're going to get a block for 5 here, so we're going to leak over 2 damage, and then we're also going to get to put a -1 counter on the old knocker. I think pretty much at this point, if Dory wants to play a normal game plan where she doesn't just send Dawnblade for 3 and then never react on it, we basically have this game deterministically wrapped up for us. We just have access to enough traps in deck that we have enough Riptide pings. So you can definitely play the game like that, where once you get too low against Riptide, you can sort of get these kind of deterministic states where your opponent kind of gets locked out of play normally. Like if Dory wanted to play through the potential traps from here on out, she would basically be required to just send Dawnblade for 3 and never react on it. And that could be a potential game plan if it weren't for the fact that we also still have a ton of damage left in deck. We have 28 cards, we have access to our entire equipment suite. We haven't done a Nimbleism pivot at all, so I just don't think it's going to be possible for her to pivot into something like that. The only awkward thing here, though, is that we end up without an arrow. That's something you can consider, though. My ratios could be off. We have it so that we have slightly more arrows than we have non-attacks, but there's always the likelihood that your hand actually may end up just not being able to do anything. So now we have the option over what we want to arsenal. If we arsenal the Inertia Trap, we don't get the Riptide trigger, which is not all really that relevant considering we have Honing Hood and Manta still available. The only thing is that if my opponent does nothing and passes back, we have to pop Honing Hood, but I think we're probably fine to split this in Arsenal. It'll at least play around some of the reprise effects as well, which I think is going to be a good benefit. Now we draw some arrows. We have 2 traps available, so looking at this right now, she played lead for speed, so both of our traps are online, which means that the Dory will go down to 1 here, and then our turn will just be sending 7, should rip 3 cards from her. And then hopefully with an arrow and Arsenal, we're able to wrap the game up from here. We still haven't drawn a Nimbleism. We don't have as many copies, of course, because we're not playing the full package, but we still have the reds because they're just good 0 for 3 pumps. And we still need to keep some stuff available to be able to use our equipment. We're just going to go ahead and play both of these on it. She'll probably get to push over the Dawnblade this turn. She has access to 5 cards, right? So I expect the Dawnblade to hit. I expect it to get a second counter, but the goal here is that after our turn, she's not going to be able to actually keep enough cards to really do anything with the Dawnblade, even though it does have the counters on it. Nip of the Heels ends up getting us pushing over by 1. Well, there's no go against force yet, so I'm assuming it's coming from the bolters. So I'm assuming it's probably just another blue in hand. Hidden Run is definitely gonna do a lot of damage this turn for sure. And it's possible that this could be another react for 3. So we could end up going down to 5 here. I think it's a pretty likely scenario. Okay, it looks like we're not going to, although the Inertia is going to end up eating this last card. I'm not sure if my opponent was fully aware of the token, but we'll see. We'll play Read the Glide Path. It doesn't really matter what we put in Arsenal here, and we're just going to look for something just to push more damage for the next turn. So we'll go ahead and we'll descend this for 7. We'll keep our pump on top. We could have bottomed it to honestly just really try to dig for that Nimbleism. But at 1 life, my opponent's kind of locked out of playing the game normally. They're even actually locked out of swinging Dawnblade next turn for 4, because if they swing it for 4, all of our traps are back online again. So they would basically have to just pass here. If they end up swinging it and we draw a trap, they'll have to they'll just lose, which is a little bit unfortunate. But I guess maybe it'll showcase how, you know, Riptide, when you do play the traps, can at least actually present kind of a dual threat on both sides of the table. So we'll just go ahead and we'll play our Nurture Trap. It'll trigger for the 1 damage, and then we'll have the game wrapped up from here. If we had to actually play out this hand, I think we probably get there because we're able to send 6 into 7. The only awkward part is that we'll have to use Honing Hood to swap the Pathing Helix for the Falcon Wing. We're able to get the go again, and then we can reload with the Manta. But hopefully that kind of explains a little bit about how the deck would play with traps. So until next time, thank you for watching.